Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Top 6 Voluntary Benefit Trends Your Employees Want. Our presenter today is Nick Park, a voluntary benefits consultant at Corporate Synergies and a healthcare industry expert. And now, I'll turn it over to you, Nick.
Well, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Wow, that was a really good hair day. Thank you for joining today. Again, just to reiterate the topic, we're focusing on 6 particular benefits today. Obviously, many of you have seen some of our material that has a list of the voluntary benefits and what they can provide for your organization. But because there's so many in scope, we really wanted to focus on some of the hottest trends that we're seeing right now in the space. And just to reiterate, voluntary benefits really do encompass more than what we traditionally think of as just, say, AFLAC benefits. So traditionally, even though they do contain some function of either 100% employee paid or even sometimes an employer contribution, they are, again, those benefits that fall outside of your core categories or maybe even some of your non-contrib tax choice style ancillary products. So today, the agenda really is going to be the value of these voluntary benefits. We're really going to go over those 6 voluntary trends that we talked about. We're going to talk about a little bit about the competitive advantage that your organization could yield by having or bolstering a voluntary benefits program. And then we're going to do a couple of implementation case studies so that you can really see the step-by-step process that we went through and what the desired results were, the objections, what we were trying to accomplish, and what the results were of those accomplishments. So without further ado, let's get into the value of these voluntary benefits. Again, most voluntary benefits, or what we think of for voluntary benefits, are 100% employee paid. Again, with that small caveat that some of the products that we'll be talking about today do have an option for an employer contribution if you're looking for ways to add comp to your employee base. They're generally maintenance-free, which means once you've selected the type of lines you're going to install into your portfolio, you can pretty much set it and forget it as far as giving an option to enroll in the benefits and having that payroll deduction, or even sometimes an ACH debit arrangement, which we'll get into a little bit more in the presentation. Some of the other values, when you offer any type of group contract from a carrier, you're going to get concessions for that risk pool, which means the bigger the risk pool, sometimes the bigger the underwriting concessions that you can get. Also, many financial asset protection voluntary products come with some type of guarantee issue, whether it's supplemental life insurance, supplemental disability insurance, long-term care, etc. So you would want to consider this because it really can give a price break to your employees from what they would see on the street. And last but not least, the real value of voluntary benefits is also that multi-generational versatile solution. And it allows an organization to sponsor several lines of coverage that might be applicable for one segment of your population and not another, and vice versa. So again, pooled risk, group contracts, guarantee issue, so meaning no health risk assessments before the enrollment process, and then, of course, giving employees different types of benefits that segments out. So getting into the actual 6 trends that we're going to talk about today, the number one trend that we would want everybody to be aware of is the emerging market for the student loan debt repayment assistance. It's a real hot topic. We'll show you why. There are a bunch of new startups in the market space competing for your business, but it's smart, and there is a dramatic reason why they are necessary. But we'll get into that a little bit. The number 2 most requested benefit inquiry that I get on an annual basis has got to be long-term care. Now, you'll see right there in the icon that we modified that specifically to say individual long-term care, and there's also a few reasons for that as well. There's essentially one carrier left on a national market level that offers group contract long-term care solutions. They're called Genworth Financial, but they are, for the lack of better terminology, cherry-picking most of their cases. They want to see at least you have 500 employees or more before they'll allow you to write that on a group voluntary basis. And we'll get into some of those details too. Number 3 is the executive reimbursement plan. And this has been a whole host of issues in the current times of mergers and acquisitions, and what we're seeing from a compliance standpoint on loose, sort of discriminatory Section 105H plans, and how to solve for that segment of your population, your executives that may need something better than the standard medical plan that you guys have for all of your employees. Trend number 4 is right in the same vein of that. This is something else that we've had a lot of experience implementing within the last several years, is an increase in individual disability for executives as well. And much like, again, the executive reimbursement plan, it's really designed for higher incomes and high performers in your organization who earn more than the maximum long-term disability benefit would pay out if somebody was to go out because they couldn't work due to illness or injury. The number 5 trend that we're seeing is definitely an uptick in telemedicine. So this is something that if your health plan doesn't have this embedded in already, you can add it in through a third-party vendor. There's several folks who do this really well, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And the 6th number trend, ever present, the warmest and fuzziest benefit of all has got to be pet insurance. And there has actually been quite a bit of development and evolution in the pet insurance market as well. Most folks may be familiar with VPI, which literally stood for Voluntary Pet Insurance. That company has since been acquired by Nationwide, and within being acquired by Nationwide, we've seen just a new host of individual insurance companies come to fruition. All right, so let's hop right into it, shall we? So starting on trend number 1 is, again, that student loan debt repayment assistance. So I'm going to kick off all of these trends with a little bit more of the detailed why. And for this why, everybody could see in Bloomberg News, you can Google this. There was a report that came out just a few weeks ago that stated that there was over $1 trillion in outstanding student loan debt in the United States right now. So it has the implication of being almost like the next housing crisis. Unfortunately, there's so much debt that's not getting repaid back that, you know, the banks that are issuing these loans, the organizations and the federal government agencies that have also issued these loans are looking at creative ways and solutions that employers can get involved to sponsor programs to assist with that. So, you know, again, if there are any parents out there, you certainly have seen the rate of tuitions increase across the board for higher education. I myself have seen slide decks from my own alma mater, and I was shocked to see that the price had more than doubled since I was in college in the very late 90s, early 2000s. So because of these runaway tuition cost increases, you know, the burden and the level of debt that a variety of younger individuals may have can be a problem for them. It could be a point of stress. All right, so to tackle this, there is an emerging class of vendors who have sort of rapidly risen in the ranks in the last couple of years. So I'm going to quickly go through some of these guys, like Volt, which was formerly Student Loan Genius. I would say that they were the first ones to pop up on our radar here at Corpus Attendees, primarily because they won a prestigious White House award for developing sort of the prototype that a lot of the other financial institutions that you'll see in the next couple of slides, thought was also a good idea and went to copy. The point really of showing you all of these vendors in this way is to kind of show you just how big this market is growing and how rapidly important it's being deemed by a lot of plan sponsors. So, from Vault, Tuition.io, SoFi, Peanut Butter, Common Bond, LendKey, et cetera, some of these are actual branches of larger banking institutions. Some are their own individual startups who have successfully fundraised, into multiple rounds of private equity. But whatever they are, the vendors that we've listed there have all been vetted by corporate synergies, and we look forward to working with them and showing you some of their bells and whistles if you're interested in pursuing any of these programs in the near future. So getting right into, again, the three key things to note that I would want you to take away from this webinar when it comes to student loan repayment benefits is that almost every single one of the vendors that we just flashed on the screen there have some type of high-tech platform for monitoring and refinancing, consolidating the debt, whether it be a platform for, again, plugging in, giving the opportunity for your employees to sort of plug in their debt and then see what the options are to help them lower their out-of-pocket costs on a monthly basis. The next important thing I would say is, or at least these vendors would want to see in some way, is either a group payment or a consolidated payment structure. So whether that's through payroll deductions, so again, as the plan sponsor, you could offer a benefit like this, and most of these platforms really encourage payroll deductions. But there are also alternatives, like I would use the vendor, they're a third-party administrator called Paylogix, and what they can do is they can copy the effectiveness of a payroll deduction, but they'll do ACH debits for all the employees that enroll. The last but not least, now, all vendors, I say, offer these three important things. The third bullet point is really sort of interdependent from the actual student loan vendor. But this is a new IRS allowable retirement plan match swap concept, whereas, say, one of the biggest problems that we're seeing outside of the health and welfare benefit space is in the retirement plan space. And because a lot of Generation Z and millennial employees have so much debt, they're not contributing to their 401k plan or their 403b plan. And the issue with that is that the higher earners in your companies may be maxing out their retirement plan on a year-to-year basis, and as such, causing some non-discrimination testing issues. So we want to encourage some of our newer employees and our younger employees to try to contribute to that retirement plan as soon as possible. And because many companies were having this issue, there was a big, groundswell to get the IRS to allow a type of match swap, whereas, traditionally if an employer, let's just use as an example, offered a 3% match, maybe they would increase their match and allow the employee who is interested in a student loan benefit to reduce their employee contribution and in a controlled environment directly allocate those funds through the student loan benefit vendor to their payor or the institution that lent them the money. So that's the idea. That's sort of a new concept that just happened in 2018. The IRS wrote a pretty significant or allowed a letter for specific companies originally that have now been held to a level standard that other companies can also use. So I would say the last bullet point on this slide is to, again, through the due diligence process, you would want to beware of high PE, PM, or per employee per month, per employee per year fees. Okay, so they all have slightly different pricing structures, but again, if you're interested in pursuing this as a benefit for your portfolio, Corporate Synergies would do the due diligence for you so that you can see and compare all of their benefits, provisions, etc. All right, moving on to the next hot topic. I would say that when we originally constructed this presentation, we thought that the student loan benefit, just because of the market growth, its emphasis as a real issue for national plan sponsors, and its growing concern, just kind of weighted it at number one. But I would really say that this next topic, which I have listed as number two, is still the most requested benefit that we get asked for outside of core medical, dental, and ancillary here at Corporate Synergies. Long-term care is a special type of insurance that's really designed to do one thing, and that is protect your assets if you lose two or more activities of daily living. And what I mean by losing two or more activities of daily living are if you cannot eat by yourself or bathe by yourself, if you can't dress by yourself or use the restroom by yourself, you probably need a home health aide or a caretaker, or you may even be so bad off that you need to be in an institution. So long-term care is a type of insurance that specifically protects your savings, your retirement, etc., to pay for that type of care. Most major medical provisions that we see in North America, the United States today, has a very limited amount of skilled nursing labor attached in its benefit plan, if at all. And those days, may be limited to 90, 120, a year, which leaves 2/3 of the year, for most folks, with an exposure to this cost, because long-term care, if anybody has ever had to hire a home health aide or has put a relative in a nursing home, it's fairly expensive. So that right along with that expense comes the premium for the overall philosophy of the premium for long-term care. That's typically a little more expensive than we see on other types of benefits, just because of its history. It's been around since the early 80s, long-term care. And in the early years, when most insurance carriers had high interest rates, which is one of the ways that they invest their money for their reserve to pay out future premium, they were in good shape. But now that we have federal government intervention on long-term interest rates, it wasn't so profitable for them, and so many of the carriers that used to be in this space have all basically stopped taking applications. Now, I also, just for kind of hammering on the what, wanted to talk about a few things that I get a lot of questions about when it comes to long-term care. If you've never had to take care of a relative or a close family friend, which is probably the primary reason most folks reach out to me and ask me to learn more about long-term care, they have had to do it themselves. And, there is quite a bit of ramifications when it comes to your time and the expense, being involved, whenever you're taking care of a parent, you love your mom or your dad very much, or your aunt or your uncle or your grandparent. And along with that comes a lot of ambiguity with the type of care that they need. So again, I'd like to shoot off a couple of other stats that we've got. Corporate Synergies does partner with several long-term care enrollment firms, which is a necessary evil when it comes to this product set. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But approximately, I'm just going to fire off some stats. 70% of all new long-term care claims started after a policyholder reaches age 80. So it's typically a type of insurance product that you would carry for a long time. that almost 70% of everybody who has a long-term care, or really 70% of all Americans, that need long-term care don't need it until they reach age 80. So it's a long-term investment. Almost 50% of new individual long-term care insurance benefits for newly opened claims paid for home care. Only a fourth of all claimants paid for nursing home. So again, most folks like that home health aid scenario that this insurance affords. Almost 50%, less than 50% of those who applied for long-term care insurance between the ages of 70 and 79 are declined for coverage due to health. So it's better, and your overall premium risk and amount of value is lower if you're able to afford the premium earlier in life. Almost less than 30% of nursing home residents over the age of 85 have been in the facility for 3 years or longer. So once you go in, you can think of, you guys understand the expense of a nursing home. It's very, very, very expensive, and it tends to eat up a lot of savings or family assets really quick. So you can offset that with long-term care. I would say last but not least, one little stat that I have from one of our insurance carrier partners is that the long-term care insurance industry overall paid out about $6.1 billion in benefits to some 200,000 individuals within the last few years. And that number is expected to increase as the baby boomer generation gets a little older. As our medications become more effective and our health care gets more effective, we're living longer, and we're living longer after major medical issues can occur. So again, that's why we think this benefit is so important. So if you guys have any questions, we're going to get to them at the end. I know that we probably do have a few, so bear with us here. Moving on from the long-term care, I'm going to talk about the third hottest topic that we have today. This one also has some caveats to it that we just want you guys to be aware of right up front. So on the executive reimbursement plan, so highly compensated executives or some of your top producers in your organization often want a form of compensation included in their benefits package that may have a higher need than, say, traditional group health plans. And I know that doesn't seem necessarily fair, but in our system of say, non-discrimination status here in the United States, classing out is one of the only acceptable ways to do this in segmentations of populations. And most organizations want to keep their most productive, their brightest, their most important employees happy. Sometimes those employees have a lot of competition for their attention. So this is a strategy that we have helped several clients employ, so that they retain those executives, they retain those producers, or they attract the best and brightest talent out for a new hire scenario. So, what we like about the executive reimbursement plans that we're talking about today is that they are an indemnity contract filed with their state in nature. And one of the biggest reasons we're talking about this today as well is Corporate Synergies has recently assisted with the merger and acquisition of some of our clients, and we discovered that the actual M&A deal was held up in one respect due to a loose 105H plan, where there was an executive reimbursement Section 105 plan in place that was sort of disconnected from the earliest version of the current HR staff, and they didn't know how to get around it. So we introduced the concept of an executive reimbursement plan on an indemnity contract basis. accepted in this particular instance in the state of New York. It was a large group, over 100 lives, so they were an applicable large employer group, which is important in New York. That's a little caveat there. But we were able to move that Section 105 plan to an indemnity contract, which solved a whole host of problems in their merger and acquisition deal, and as such, the deal was completed and moved forward. So a typical group health plan, getting into the third bullet point there, again, may not provide access to certain out-of-network medical benefits or higher dental benefits because it's not conducive from a pricing standpoint to offer, on a non-discrimination basis, certain types of medical plans only for select people. So this is a way that you can do that. You can give everybody the same slew of, dual option, triple option health plans maybe, and then for your select executives, you can give them an additional form of compensation. So one of the biggest questions that we get, in these indemnity contracts is the idea that you want to see these indemnity, unlike Section 105, one of the real values of the indemnity contract when it comes to these executive reimbursement plans is the ability to lower that taxable income. It's almost like flexible spending account. They can be paid for on a pre-tax basis. We typically see the class out for these type of executive reimbursement plans by title, by tenure, or even by performance metric. So we do have a group who set up a type of performance metric for two or more or older year tenured employees, and and if you met your performance metrics and your performance review, you may have been able to receive this benefit. The last thing that I'll say about this is there are 6 states which we would want to caution you for this. Fortunately, I know many folks on this call today are from New Jersey. New Jersey is one of the states that does not allow an indemnity-style executive reimbursement plan. Connecticut as well, Vermont, New Hampshire, and finally the state of Washington. But New York and Pennsylvania, where I know quite a few folks are also calling in from, does allow executive reimbursement plans. Staying in the same vein of this type of class-out executive benefit theme is our 4th big trend that we have had a lot of opportunity to work with groups over the last couple years on. And it is just like the executive health plan is meant to extend or give greater benefits, mostly for out-of-network providers that don't take insurance. Individual disability insurance, or IDI, is another form of executive compensation that protects executives, high producers, who may earn more than their maximum long-term disability. Again, so we've talked about long-term care. This is long-term disability, LTD. As you know, many of our groups have a 60%. It may be higher, it may be lower, but I'm going to use 60% to a maximum of, say, $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month, and in some cases, very rarely, $20,000 a month benefits. But believe it or not, if you had a 60% to $15,000 monthly benefit on your long-term disability contract, anybody earning over $300,000 a year is going to max out that benefit. So if you think about it, sometimes our C-suites, our really higher-performing producers earn much more than that a year, and if they were to go out on a disability, they would earn much less than 60% of their replacement income. And that's really what IDI is meant to do. So what's also traditional in a lot of long-term disability contracts is that the contract covers only the base pay, and that commissions and bonus compensation are typically not included. And with the IDI, it is included. It's very traditionally with executive IDI. We want to take into account total compensation so that even if we do, say, a prior year look back to look at, say, somebody's W-2 is quite a standard metric for establishing an underwriter's method for giving IDI coverage. So we'd look back, say, at 2018 for 2019, and we would want to isolate anybody making over that $300,000 mark in this particular example to see if they would want some form of IDI. Now, this is one of those benefits that we have certainly implemented on a 100% voluntary basis, but it's also one of those benefits where we have seen some employer fund buy-in, and so there are many different variations in the quotes that we could get. We do like to explore both a contributive or a partially contributive style along with a 100% voluntary quote when we get these for our groups. Obviously, when you have some employer dollars thrown into the mix, you get much better premium rates for the individuals involved. Okay. Again, executive IDI, like executive reimbursement, it's a benefit that can be offered as a form of compensation. It's very popular. We see in law firms and medical providers, C-suite executives. Again, it's just one of these benefits that's really increased its presence in our book of business and to our clients overall. The number 5 trend for today is telemedicine. So we're starting to see an increase, at least where I'm from, the tri-state area of New York City, that a lot of the medical carriers in our local market there are adding telemedicine into the health plan, usually for the primary care visit co-payment equal, but that's not always true. You know, a lot of health plans that we see, or if you're a national employer and you have carved out local healthcare branches, don't offer telemedicine. So we thought it would be an interesting topic to talk about today. Telemedicine has really risen with the rise of consumer-driven health plans, and in itself is another form of decision consumerism that enables you to, say, skip going to the emergency room or urgent care visit. And if you're like me, I've got two two-year-old twins. They never seem to get sick or need medical attention when it's convenient. So it's always good to have that ability to reach out to a licensed medical physician by phone within 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You're done with the session on the phone that doctor can prescribe. Maybe it's antibiotic that you can pick up at your local 24-hour pharmacy right down the street. So it's very interesting. We've gotten a lot of questions about how telemedicine works as far as, can they do that? How could a doctor give you a proper physical or an examination or diagnose your issue right over the phone? But I think if anybody here has experienced it, you already know, they're very forthright in their questioning on the telephone. The interview process does eliminate a lot of factors. And then in some instances, I've even seen a doctor or a physician or a physician assistant provide a Skype call or a FaceTime call right over the phone or through the application. Say I'm going to use one of the vendors as an example, Teladoc. You could do a FaceTime right through your smartphone with a doctor that's licensed in the state from which you're calling. And I've seen examples where the doctor asked the member to hold his or her camera right in the throat so that he could see the swollen tonsillitis and the need for antibiotics. So as technology seems to improve, I think we're going to continue to see a greater rise in utilization for telemedicine. It's convenient and, believe it or not, surprisingly effective. So I would ask if this is not embedded in your major health plan now, I would definitely talk to your account manager or your consultant here at Corporate Synergies about how to get it installed. Okay, Hey guys, we're coming down the threshold here. I promised warm and fuzzy at the end. We always like to leave on a high note. We do have some examples to go over here in a few minutes, which I think you'll find very informative. But the last but not least, trend number 6 has been pretty prevalent over the years as far as getting asked for by employees at the office, having HR contact us here at Corporate Synergies. So, you know, little tip, Americans spend over $70 billion a year on vet costs for the pets, but only a very slim margin actually have pet insurance. So, you know, if you look across the board and you see the industry or the markets designed for pets, you know, we're increasing the quality of our pet food. We've got big brand box stores, you know, that are prolific in every community where you can buy everything from toys to, you know, crates to hair care products, you know, to you name it, right? So its need is pretty apparent. You know, most employers have employees with pets, and so for that reason, it's become very popular. Now, the implementation of this benefit is probably the easiest that you're ever going to see. I typically, throughout multiple vendors, have essentially 2 phone calls because pet insurance is actually in most states a property and casualty form of insurance. Your pet is generally underwritten on an individual basis with demographic. Believe it or not, it sounds like a real person healthcare, right? So typically we see, you know, the breed of your animal, you know, types, reptiles, horses, you name it. They'll take any kind of pets. And then, you know, from that point forward, the participant goes to a direct pay or either a payroll deduction policy as far as paying for the premium. Now, again, with the direct pay, which is really where I'm seeing the insurance carriers start to direct, it just makes it easier because we just see one of these things, the variances on the premium that all the individuals may have to pay for the type of pet that they have can be so wildly different that we know it's really frustrating, and we've been encouraging direct pay through employees on this one. But again, you can do payroll deductions if you wanted to provide that convenience to your employees. The other trend that I would say that we've seen recently in pet insurance, it used to be much more like people insurance, whereas, again, like I said earlier, you take into a bunch of different considerations in the underwriting of the pet, you know, where you live, access to the veterinarian network, you know, the level of quality of care maybe in your geographic area. Then we've seen it move from that sort of really tight, specific underwriting to a general indemnity style plan, which is to say we're sort of more like dental insurance. And what I mean by that is you'll pay a premium or flat premium, say for a plan that has a slight deductible and then would give you an allowance, just like your dental insurance would give you an allowance up to, say, $8,500 a year for your pet. And you can use that indemnity style reimbursement to cover, you know, any of your pet's needs up until that $8,500. That comes from a recent case that I just did. So 85 seemed to be pretty standard. I've seen 7,500, 8,500. Again, there are many vendors out there that are offering pet protection plans now, and so you would want to talk to us about also looking at due diligence and seeing what's right for your unique population. The last thing I'll say about pet insurance is it's true that not all networks are equal. In the indemnity style plan that I talked about that we've seen, it typically can go to any in or out of network style veterinarians. But if your employees opt for a more traditional style plan, you really want to make sure that the in-network veterinarians are plenty. And if you live in a more rural area, you know, we've even gone so far as to have done what you would see in major medical plans as far as a geo a geomap of accessibility. So again, when you're thinking about pet insurance, all these topics come into play, all these factors. And it is, again, one of the easiest benefits to install. You kind of, again, set this up and either decide to do payroll or not payroll. But again, we could definitely show you our due diligence and our comparison factors for the various players in the market. All right, so moving on from the trends themselves, it's got about 10 more minutes left on the webinar, so appreciate everybody hanging in there. We want to talk about some of the common underwriting traits found on most voluntary benefits. Again, this is one of the reasons why you sort of plan sponsor these types of benefits in your portfolio. We want to warn you that most, if not all, of the topics that we've talked about today, and even in general, there are obviously many lines of coverage we're not talking about or focusing on today, but many have underwriting requirements for minimum participation requirement. So unless noted by your consultant in the beginning, I'd be careful to note that minimum participation requirement. There's philosophically, a lot of my HR partners out there don't like the idea that you're being cornered into, getting a certain amount of folks from a sales perspective. It's sort of like a dirty word. But the reality is that the insurance carriers, to offer really competitive group rates, they need a certain amount of risk pool, or they need bodies in a certain pool to offset any of the claim utilization that goes out. So one of the ways that they can mitigate that risk is ensuring that their plan sponsor partners understand that they need that. And so typically you'll find that in almost every contract, except for maybe pet insurance. So as I sit here today, here in Camden, New Jersey, where our national headquarters is, I'm literally looking at the Ben Franklin Bridge over to Philadelphia. And old Ben had a great phrase that I love when it comes to implementing voluntary benefits, and that is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And what I mean by that really is our philosophy here and the importance that we weigh on installing any benefits is you are our business partners and our collaborators for your benefit portfolio, and we don't take that relationship lightly. So when we do an initiative and we agree to work in concert together to roll out new benefits for your employees of any type, we take the same approach and considerations to these purely employee paid benefits. Because there's still a lot of gain for you as a plan sponsor to yield from doing it. You're giving something to your employees. Maybe not every employee needs, but for the quarter percentage, the 20, 25, 30% who typically does uptake or elects voluntary benefits, that's very common. You're really satisfying something that they have perceived that they need. So that being said, you want to ensure that the quality of what you're giving is at the highest level, that they're getting the most value for the premium that they're exchanging, the most bang for the buck, and that you're also going to have something for them to take with them, if they do leave your organization. So most of these types of products are very portable or convertible. The last thing that I would say is you would want to issue some type of comprehensive communication, much like I'm doing today, and many of you out there who I've worked with on the phone today know that we would want to do some type of group PowerPoint presentation or maybe a benefit guide presentation if we're rolling out more than a few voluntary lines of coverage at the same time. And with that communication strategy, it goes right into the project plan. We would talk about how we're going to execute it, the frequency that we would want to mention that we're rolling out voluntary benefits for the first time, and all the other good stuff, the who, what, why, when, where, etc., the details. And when we do this successfully, and we really focus on communication, we eliminate the ambiguity about their importance, and we also deliver that feeling to employees that they're getting something that their employer cares about them, and even if they have to pay for the premium themselves, that they got a whole heck of a lot of value out of the extension or the expansion of their opportunity to enroll in new benefits. Okay, so case study 1, I'm going to go into this really quickly. This was one of our large restaurant clients here at Corporate Synergies Group. They were a highly praised fine dining brand, and their philosophy to their employees were very paternal. They really do care about their employees quite a bit. The group had a tough time, believe it or not, with the type of employees that they had making the minimum participation for their core medical and dental contracts even. So as you guys know, out there in HR, many major medical contracts want to see a minimum of 50% participation of the eligible class. But when you have maybe a mix of white, gray, and blue-collar employees all in the same organization, we seem to have a downtick on the bottom end of the blue and the gray collar area. So, they needed a way to get to the employees a little more pinpointedly. The other thing that they were still doing was they were relying on paper enrollments. Okay, so these are all the factors that we had to deal with starting at the beginning of the line. So there was also a multiple language barrier, as you know. A lot of restaurants employ people of all walks of life and in all languages. And while most employees were required to know a minimum standard of English, it wasn't the primary language for almost a third of the overall employee population. So how could we combine all these factors and communicate the benefits better to all employees equally and inclusively? So HR wanted to bridge. Also, they wanted to get off those paper enrollments, and they wanted to find a solution, a virtual solution eventually, to start training folks to be more comfortable with the self-service tool. So as we came into the meeting and we took all of these factors into account, and we began the implementation and project planning stage, we illustrated our knowledge using a type of division of labor. So this is something we want everybody out there to know that is an opportunity when installing voluntary benefits, that there could be a great trade and in that division of labor. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of entities out there or a lot of opportunity to leverage either professional benefit counselors and professional communication firms to illustrate or to communicate to employees just, a much more organized method of getting their comprehension. So in a lot of instances, or in this instance specifically, we did leverage an enrollment firm force who were all knowledgeable, deeply knowledgeable on the lines of new coverage that the plan sponsor was adding, but also really deep dive into their core benefit plans, because the idea for this in particular was to also increase participation in the major medical plan. So Corporate Synergies performed due diligence on multiple carriers, just like we would on a medical or a dental RFP, and we reviewed contract provisions specifically so that our client knew exactly what they were getting and for the dollar value. The voluntary coverages focused initially on asset protection for gaps in health insurance. Consequently, I'll just say really quick that the first go-around was so successful, we actually did another go-around using the same enrollment firm methodology, using laptops and having mandatory participation, that we ended up having a second round as well, and that was less the asset protection and more things like prepaid legal plans. And, we'll get into that a little bit in a second. The other benefit for having a professional enrollment in a communication firm was that the benefit counselors that came on site to all the restaurants were multilingual, bilingual, mostly Spanish bilingual, and at the same token, while they were showing up on site to all the restaurant locations, top management in the organization had a hierarchy sort of brigade of expectation that benefit counselors were going to be able to talk to all employees. So dishwashers, line cooks, waiters, GMs, accountants, you name it, even if they were taken off the line from their kitchens in a shift, the expectation was that all middle management and lower management or supervisors were going to allow their employees the opportunity to see benefit counselors to really get that inclusion. So the results, so sorry, I think I accidentally hit 2 there. I think I'm missing 1. There we go. Sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry, everybody. That's my fault, everybody. Sorry about that. I got my slides all mixed up, so pardon me. So the results were. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So we had notes. I really wanted to get into the execution there. There we go. So we provided stewardship on strategy, the implementation, and the project planning. And again, we got this. I am so sorry, everybody. Okay. So employee feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Many employees who did not speak English as their first language reported a very deep level of inclusion, and I keep bringing up that word. It was very important for this particular client. And as such, the overall feeling and feedback to HR and top management was that they felt that they had been deeply communicated to for the first time ever. In fact, participation from non-primary English-speaking employees increased almost 40%, as I recall. So, we definitely eliminated the risk for the group health plan of being canceled by the vendor, and really bolstered a warm feeling of inclusion. And the only way I can explain it is that we got a lot of the credit for helping their overall organization just have a more beneficial and positive environment. Okay. So getting into case study number 2, and I promise you guys we're almost done. So getting into the profile really quick. I had an executive search and placement firm, and I wanted to use this as a case study because, we talked about these group benefits and then kind of talked about some of the executive carve-out stuff too. So I want to talk about a very high-end executive search and placement firm. They had one of their senior partners had suffered a stroke and was forced to leave work, couldn't work anymore. And while he was out of the office, it led to many of his colleagues asking, because I guess they had a very stressful job, to asking for more type of income protection should they also suffer something like a disability that would cause them not to work. Their contract was already one of the richest in at our book of business, 60% to $20,000 a month. But there were many employees in the executive search firm who earned well over what that contract maximum would be. They earned well over $350,000, $400,000. Executives and the most successful producers, based on total compensation, were carved out as the applicable class due to their income segmentation, and they were written as those were now the eligible class on a purely voluntary basis in this issue. So when we came to the table to provide the type of stewardship that the organization needed, we again performed due diligence on, I believe, 5 to 6 different vendors that we partner with for IDI specifically. And ultimately, I don't mind saying, I believe MetLife, in this particular instance, won that RFP, which is good because kind of explains, I think, one of the reasons why in this particular instance was they would provide professional benefit counselors direct from MetLife to help educate employees. Voluntary coverages were offered on a base standard guaranteed issue, or guaranteed standard issue, GSI as they say specifically in IDI provision terms. But if an employee desired even more, there were additional buy-up provisions, and those did require some type of simplified underwriting. So typically you'll get guaranteed standard issue on IDI coverage. Again, it's a form of supplemental long-term disability that sits on top of your base long-term disability plan. It adds additional income protection, and it does not offset from that group chassis benefit. I want to stress that on almost all the IDI cases that we've had, the carrier was very involved with the communication, and this was no different. They were there for every presentation, and they were there for the sit-downs with the executives explaining what the income protection value was and how it protected the bonus comp specifically. So moving on to the execution, let's kind of talk about that. I'm sorry I didn't hit the button again. Shame on me. We've gone a pretty long hour here, so please forgive me, folks. The results were that the employees met with me and that carrier partner. And in this case, this particular enrollment, because these were voluntary benefits, were non-mandatory. It didn't matter, though, due to the significant occurrence of one of the senior leaders of this firm in particular that left for a disability. The desire for almost all of the applicable, eligible executives was pretty high. And in this particular case, again, because of those conditions, we easily met that mandatory participation requirement. Bonuses and production commissions were included for the first time from that income replacement and that paycheck insurance, if you will. And then success in effectively communicating to partners and producers ultimately provided a method that this particular firm, they had multiple offices in New York, Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and they had some challenges communicating and rolling out more specific corporate-wide initiatives from a central communication standpoint. And in doing so, and doing this more specifically with the partners of this executive search firm, we established sort of a baseline for rolling out future initiatives. So it helped them quite a bit. Then I would also say this is absolutely true. Within 4 months of this policy implementation, another key leader in the organization actually had to file a claim very quickly, was placed on disability. And again, they had a 90-day elimination period. Their IDI contract matched their long-term disability elimination period for the benefit. And that employee was out of work for almost a year and a half. While he was recovering, he had total income replacement. Okay, so again, that is the last of the actual slides. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We're definitely over that 50-minute mark for your HR credits, so we'll be sending those along for attendance. I'm just going to go, we have about 4 bullet points of questions before we hang up here. How many of CFT's clients have student loan benefits in place? Well, that's an excellent question. It's actually one of the most frequent questions we get about student loan benefits. We have several now. They're literally so new. that within the last year or so, I would say that the vendors that I had on the first series of slides have really just come to market, but the need has been so high, again, the private equity that's going into some of these startups as a perceived issue has been the key indicator for us of its serious need. So we only have a few right now, but it's one of those things that I think that we've been talking about with most of our. If you're here at Corporate Synergies, you know we like to do a strategic planning session every year as standard as part of our service. And in that strategic planning session, we've definitely been talking about this quite a bit. And I think that the uptick of this is going to increase really, really rapidly. Are the student loan benefits fees pre-tax deductions? That's a great question. And the answer is yes. That's actually the benefit, is that you get to use pre-tax deductions to help allocate towards that student loan debt. And that's one of the biggest significance. Anybody can Google the IRS rules around student loan benefits. It's pretty easy to search for. And the letters that have been made public that allow the companies to do this are also listed. So yes, you're essentially taking pre-tax 401k or 403b deductions, and you're allocating it towards student loans. Which carriers are you working with for pet insurance? That's a good question. There's so many to list. I didn't think it was beneficial in this particular webinar. But yeah, come talk to us about that. There are quite a few options out there. I'll rattle off a few right now. So I mentioned that voluntary pet insurance, VPI, became nationwide pet. We've also conducted through RFPs placements with Trupanion. Pet Plan is another big one. And there are several others as well. But I think those are the top three really that we've implemented. How does this work for benefits such as weight loss or fitness programs? If you're referring to wellness, so a lot of the trends that we talked today aren't necessarily directed towards weight loss or fitness programs, but there is another unique market condition that we really just saw really increase in visibility in the fourth quarter of 2018, and that is something I think we're going to talk about more in depth on a future webinar. But that's going to include what we're calling right now the fitness aggregate market, which is a wonderful voluntary benefit that allows you to kind of give employees access to group gym networks. So you may have heard of ClassPass or Gym Pass or PeerFit. Those are the three biggest players right now. But just to answer your question, that's a future topic for another time. Feel free to talk to your account lead here at Corporate Synergies if you're interested in learning more about that. We'll get you information.